those updates straight away. So I'd like to introduce to you Sam. So Sam is the Managing Director of Incubator, and I say that's so bad, so apologies for my pronunciation. So I met Sam a couple of years back at a Google event, and so, since then, In Marketing We Trust has become a partner as such. Through we use their platform, their access to DV360 through NMPI, DQ&A, and you'll understand the confusion in a moment because Sam is a very busy guy, managing several different brands, which I'm sure he'll give you an overview of. So yeah, Sam is going to take us through the importance of a data-driven dynamic creative strategy. So without any more delay, Sam, over to you.
Great, thanks, Paul. Guys, I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can all see this. Just let me know that this comes through okay.
Yeah, all good.
Everyone can see that?
Yep.
Cool. Guys, firstly, thank you. No doubt you've all probably been inundated with webinar and, you know, talks. You're probably getting about 3 or 4 invites a day. So thank you for taking the time out to dial in. More importantly, it's after hours, so I admire your dedication. So thank you very much for giving me the time. Hopefully, you know, I can honor that time and give you something you can take away from this. We will be giving you a copy of the presentation. So some of it, it's quite detailed. By no means can I give it justice in the time. So I won't go into every slide in a granular level, but if there's anything you want more detail on, feel free to, you know, reach out. But you will all be getting a copy of the presentation. So with that in mind, what are we going to cover today? I'll give you an overview of who we are and the various businesses. Talk to the state of dynamic in the, you know, APAC region and where it's sort of at and where most clients sit, and then actually give you a deep dive on what's involved with building a dynamic strategy for clients. And finally, and most importantly, give you some case studies of work that's actually been done. So it's all good and well to talk about the theory, i.e. as Google and Facebook are very good at doing. But, you know, we'll actually show you some real live examples of clients who have implemented this across the region. So you can see some, you know, case studies. Feel free to put any questions into the chat and we'll deal with those at the end. Will be one of our consultants, is also going to be on the call for any questions that are a bit too deep from my knowledge. So feel free to, you know, hit him with as many detailed questions as you can. And if you stump him, we'll come back with an answer after the presentation. So who are we? We're a combination of 3 businesses. So in a previous life, I was one of the founding members of the retail team at Google. I said goodbye to the, you know, free breakfast, lunch and dinner and my Swedish massage. And at that time, it was unheard of. I left Google probably about 10 years ago when there was under probably 40 people in the Google office in Sydney, and set up an agency in Bondi. Luckily that worked out. I could still pay the bills. That media part of the business, which does a lot of performance media for a lot of big Australian and global clients, is known as NMPI. The other business is a tech consultancy, GMP, DV360, SA360, campaign manager, partner in the Australian and global markets, where we actually, you know, set up people's GMP stacks. We consult on strategy, and that's the tech business. And the third business, which, you know, we're predominantly talking about today, is JoyStick, which is a data-led creative agency, once again, set up by a few ex-Googlers, 3 ex-Google guys over in LA about 10 years ago as well, and basically landed Google as their foundation client, and they've grown the business from that. And we still do a lot of work globally on with Google on their digital campaigns. So there's 3 businesses, but what I'll get to is its intrinsic that if you do dynamic creative, it's not just a creative element. It actually is underpinned by strong technology and data, and also the media. So all three work collectively strong together. Whether you use separate agency partners or whether you go with one, it doesn't really matter. But it's intrinsic that those three work very closely together. Rather than probably take you through who JoyStick is and what they do, I'll show you this video. Now, if it doesn't work well based upon your internet connections, I apologize. If you're tethering from your phone, good luck. But you will get a copy of this if it doesn't come through. So I'll play it, but fingers crossed with your connections, it all works out well.
Alexa, do aliens exist?
So far, there has been no proof that alien life exists, but the universe is a very big place.
So fingers crossed that all worked well for you. Let me just get out of this. Bear with me. So in terms of our remit and where we operate, so we are global. So we have a Singapore office. We operate in Asia as well. Our kind of main hubs are Cape Town in South Africa. We have a large European presence, and also in the States in LA and Los Angeles. So there's 18 offices in total. Headcount now I think is just over 500, and we've got just under 800 global clients. In terms of Australia, we're based in Sydney, and we also look after the Auckland region from Sydney, and then Singapore typically looks after the Asian market. So no problems in doing global campaigns, and we sort of can leverage that. But I'm not just going to show you the work we do. I'll show you some Australian work that we've done. So it's not just the US examples. Just a bit of brand candy. These are some of the brands that we do work with currently. Not like your typical agency deck that you show someone you worked with 15 years ago. These are our clients that we currently work with. And I'll also got the Australian clients such as the likes of Bonds, Koala, Zip, we do work with in the Australian market. Obviously, we are certified. We are a GMP partner for creative and for media. And we build for GMP. However, we can build outside of that, but today's presentation specifically focuses on the dynamic strategy for GMP. So that's enough about us. Now I'll look at what is dynamic, where is it within the Australian and the APAC market currently, what are the deficiencies, why are clients not using dynamic, and how you can take your clients along that journey, and what the process actually is. So if you look at the APAC region, and if you look at them in terms of marketing maturity or the Google marketing maturity curve, the mass majority are still in nascent. So most clients are still deploying static ads with limited targeting. They're still very much doing the old spray and pray. And that's a large proportion of them. Some of them are evolving a bit more, moving into HTML5 and then they're doing some basic audience targeting. So that's sort of the emerging. You know, you would probably say that 95% of the market are in those two kind of areas. As they become more progressive from a marketing viewpoint, that's where they start moving into data-driven creative. That's when they start setting up audience profiles. That's when they start changing the messaging and sequential messaging based on data signals. It's just when we say they're connected. And when they fully move to multi-moment, that's when it's, you know, it's very scalable. It's product focused, it's feed focused, it's cloud driven. And then we've got multiple API points, which the creative changes dynamically. But if you look at the APAC region in terms of where they are, the majority is still using static banners. And that's because they operate in a silo. So they typically will go, a creative agency will do my creative. The creative agency doesn't talk to their media agency. There's some, you know, without being rude, some bullshit approach where they still go with this old school mythology of it has to be all integrated. You've got to integrate your TV, your radio, your outdoor and your digital with some secret message, which is just ludicrous that people still operate like that, because you don't need to do that from a digital viewpoint, and you should be customizing your message to the individuals, where if you look at more traditional media, you don't have that luxury. It's becoming smarter and it's allowing to do that. But with TV, outdoor and radio, you're typically limited in the amount of messages you can push. Whereas in digital, it's infinite, and you've got those signals on the consumers. And they're doing themselves a really big disservice. So if you look at the stats from the IAB, 97% of ads lack personalized creative or messaging. Now, the downside of that is 70% of campaign performance is driven by creative. So it's one of the critical elements of how successful a campaign is the creative, yet 97% of them are lacking personalization, and they're very, very basic. So the question beckons, why is that? It's a few reasons in the APAC region. Firstly, there's a lack of knowledge. Secondly, there's a lack of talent of actually how to implement. We're not as advanced as the UK or the US markets. And a big one, which I hate to say it, is convenience. So if you look at platforms like Criteo, AdRoll, they get traction in the market because they do everything. So, you know, you get these gnarly fluoro yellow banners that could be argued that they do perform based upon their metrics, but they're buying the media. You don't get the transparency. You've got limited creative control, and a lot of marketers go with them because of the convenience that they don't want to do that hard work in building out that creative, and nor does the agency. So we're stuck in this sort of thing where we're sort of still stuck in creative manners. Now, what is the benefit of moving to a dynamic strategy? So the first one, which is quite obvious, is it becomes data-driven personalization. You serve different audiences, different messages. We all know, obviously, that's more powerful. You can exclude and you can tailor your message based upon what you know about those people. It helps you rapidly scale your creative. So another reason why very few creative agencies push dynamic, because it's not in their financial best interest. Because once you set up dynamic templates, then you're going back to the creative agency less and less and less for creative builds, which is not in an ideal world. It's not in their best interest to promote you to decrease your creative costs. Another added benefit is increased ROI, which I'll show you later some examples. The ROI from customizing your messaging to the audience, you get massive uplifts in ROI. Is obviously in itself, it pays for the creative. And then finally, you save time and money. You don't always need to go back to the creative agency. You don't always need to, go through rounds and rounds of changes. So over time, it saves you money and it saves you time. However, you've got to invest the time and the money upfront. And when people see that, that's where they freak out and they don't want to do the work and they don't want to pay the money. So we're sort of stuck with using statics and basic creative. So what are the kind of key elements to move to a dynamic strategy? It's got to be data driven. So you've got to have underpinning data. It needs to be customer centric. So if you can't identify your audiences, what is the use in building out 50,000 different creative executions if you can't identify an audience? There's no use. So it has to be underpinned by data, and then it has to be able to identify audiences to who you're going to serve those different creatives to. And then finally, it needs to be automated. If it's not automated, good luck at trying to manually, run up to tens of thousands of different creatives to different audiences. So how do we do that? Now, basically, the process which I'll take it through, and I'll send you a copy of this, is quite detailed. But in summary, it typically kicks off with a discovery on the strategy. So what is the actual strategy of that particular client? Where do we want to take them? What do they want to achieve? And you need to get the key people in the room to start that process. Once you've identified what the end goal is, the next critical element that we move into is building an audience profile and mapping what we're actually going to measure for success. If you cannot build the audience profile, don't waste your time, because unless you can identify the people that you're going to serve different messages to, or signals to serve different messages to, there's no use in doing it. And you may as well stay with your old school approach of hitting the same customers with the same message, because you need to be able to identify them. Third stage, once you've identified the audiences, once you've identified what you're going to be able to measure, then you go into developing the campaign. Fourth is obviously you deliver it, and then you measure, and then you start the process again. So it always evolves so that you're always driving continual improvements on the creative based around what's actually measurements and what's driving success. This slide right here is typically why these things don't get off the ground in the Australian market. Because these are the people that you typically need to do it successfully. If you're lucky, you can find a Will, and he'll be able to do multiple parts of these, but typically you need an individual or a person that can do at least a couple of this. So the key people in these teams to roll out a dynamic strategy, firstly, you need a creative strategist. So you need a media strategist and a creative strategist who's got the mindset of designing the strategy of what you're looking to achieve. So, what's the underlying client problem or success that you're trying to do? And then how do you design a strategy around that? Once you've designed that, you then need a creative producer who's going to pull all the key people in. Now, they might be the creative strategist, may well be the creative producer if you're lucky, but typically you need someone to drive the project to pull the key stakeholders in. Thirdly is a feed specialist. No different to Google Shopping or Facebook now. If you don't have a robust feed, you're wasting your time. It is all feed driven. Like, just by fixing your Google Shopping feed alone, you get massive uplifts in SEM. It's the same for dynamic campaigns. And you don't have a robust feed, it's absolutely crucial to do advanced dynamic campaigns. Media consultant, obviously it's not just about the creative, you need someone who's going to buy the media and then design that around your creative. So they play a critical role. Technical consultant, because as I'll show you later, this can get quite technical into patching all the various APIs and stuff together to make it all work. And then finally, the developer. These are kind of the key stakeholders for more advanced projects. For less advanced, basic A/B testing, multivariate testing, you don't need as many parties, but this is what you need in best practice for a successful project. Feed. I'm going to keep on banging on about this. I won't take you through all the points, but I can't emphasize enough that, like search, like social, if you want to do a successful dynamic campaign, you have to have a robust feed. It's come a long way in the last 2 or 3 years because a lot of people invest a lot of time into their GMC feeds, but you need a robust feed in order to do this. So the 6 steps, I won't take you through them all in detail. I'll rather get you to the examples and show you them preferably, but this is the 6 steps that we go through with clients, or you could go through with your clients to get them down this path. So we typically kick off things with a project kickoff. And this is where you want to get all the key stakeholders in the room. You want to define what the objectives are. How are you going to measure success? What assets do they have? What are the brand guidelines? What fonts? What everything like that. who are the key points of contact. So basically you're getting the project team together and you're defining, you know, working rhythms and looking what you can achieve is the first kind of goal, because it may not be achievable, or what they're looking to do, there might be other solutions, but that's sort of the key kickoff. We then go into the dynamic strategy where we look into, you know, what are the data signals, what are the insights, what messages, what formats, and then we really start exploring this strategy once we've sort of identified the objective. But a real key part of this is identifying the data signals and what we can tap into, so then we can tailor the creative based on those data signals. Now, when you look at data signals, it can typically come from one of three areas. So audience is quite basic. So first party audience. So people have visited your site, people have engaged with you on other media. Have they engaged with your search? Have they been to certain sections of your site? Have they looked at certain products on your site? Have you got DMP lists? Is it third party data that you're buying from the likes of Blue Sky? Are you buying it from Quantium? So what other third party data are you using? What Google similar audiences have you got? What affinity audience have you got? What lookalikes have you got? Basically, we build out as many audiences possibly that we can that would make sense to send them different creative. And then you go into what we know as environmental triggers. So, you know, geolocation, because you want to serve people different messaging based upon their location. Very basic one is retail. If you've got 200 retail outlets, why wouldn't you tailor the message based upon their proximity to the store? Time of day, environment, device, what kind of, are they on a mobile? Are they on Apple? Are they on Android? What are they on? Because you should be tailoring the message based upon what they're on, what network speed, what browser. So all these things we build in because it's going to help how we're going to change different creative. And then obviously finally media, we want to look at the media. So to give you an example of like one that we do in Amsterdam a lot, is what we refer to as misery targeting. So we work for Transavia, which is the kind of, you know, Jetstar or Virgin when it was around in Australia in the European market. It's owned by KLM. And if anyone's worked with airlines before, it's all about shifting seats at the right price, not necessarily about shifting seats, but shifting the right seats at the right price at the right time. So if you can flog them at a premium, you do, but you've got to flog them based upon a recommendation engine on pricing. So our creative taps into the recommendation engine and will live change the price of seats on different airlines based upon the price of those flights. So that's the first thing. The API feed will change the price dynamically in the ad. We then will pull in stuff we know about the individual. So where they've traveled before, what their preferences are, and we'll dynamically change those ads. A third thing is we know we want to get someone on the way to work on a Monday, preferably if it's raining because you're miserable, it's wet. So then we'll hit you with hot weather destinations, but we don't want to hit you with all hot weather destinations. We only want to hit you with the destinations that we actually need to shift. So if we need to shift, for example, Amsterdam to Spain or London to Brazil or whatever it is, we need to know the routes that we need to shift, and then we insert that into the ads. Now, think about all the different permutations on how many different creatives you'd be creating on this, and you go into the tens of thousands. It's very much tech-led. It's very much location-led, and there's a lot of elements that come into that. That is all based on APIs, and it's all automated, and then it's continually tweaking based upon the knowledge. Without the data signals, though, that's why it's so crucial that we spend a lot of time to identify the various data signals. Step 3, we've identified the data signals, we've identified the strategy, then we sort of go away, or you go away and you come back with concepts. So, you know, you're going to come back to the client and present potential layouts or mocks of how these creative elements are going to look. It's very important that you show them visually and not just talk to them, but show them, you know, this is what happens when you'll dynamically update price. This is what dynamically will happen when you update a product. Because once you build that shell, you're sort of locked in there. So it's really critical to get the buy-in on this because you don't want to be down the stage changing it all out once you start linking it all up. So we always develop the concept, get buy-in, and then we go away and sort of build those concepts. And this is where the chunk of the work is actually building them out. So this is sort of some key things we've found as part of the build process. But, you know, the key part of the work in a lot of this stuff is building it out and then getting all the tech in place, you know, linking up with a recommendation engine and then pulling it all together. Luckily, if you get through all that, you get the final review, you're good to go. And then you will set it live with some pre-testing. And then once it's live, you look at the data and then you start just feeding back into the process and tweaking it based upon the learnings. So that all sounds well in theory, or potentially might sound very confusing. So what I wanted to do is show you some examples of where clients have come with problems, and then what we've built, whether it's easy or whether it's complicated, and then show you the solutions. So firstly, with audience targeting, it's probably the most basic. You're just knowing a certain audience, and then you're changing the message based around that audience. An example in the Australian market is Koala. Yeah, so Koala came to us with a problem of they wanted a more personalized approach with their display. They, didn't want to have to always go back to their creative agency to pay for tweaks. They wanted to be able to do that in-house. They wanted to be able to, update on the fly. And ultimately, like most clients, they wanted to improve their ROI of their products. So we work with them, we decide what success was. And, obviously success for them is shifting. Back then it was shifting beds. It's broader now, but back then it was beds. And we developed a dynamic template that they were happy with. It meets all their brand objectives and they're happy with the look and feel. So we developed the template. And then we agreed on elements to test within that template. So, the example here is what picture do you use? Where do you put the button? How do you state the offer? Where do you put the brand? And then test that against different audiences. So we build all the different audience segments out, and then find the optimal layout for the optimal audience. So it's not about your old DM environment where you're trying to beat the control and then that becomes your new DM. What this is about is becoming what's the optimal control or display creative for the different audiences, because different creatives will perform better on different audiences. Now, this is quite basic, but by doing this alone, we got a 1.9x increase in conversions. We got a 30% cost saving in terms of time on creative and a 57% decrease on conversions for CPAs. This is not a hard project. This is quite easy in terms of API feeds. You're just basically testing the elements of a creative ad. No one is doing this. Very few clients in the Australian market are dynamically doing this because I think it's just too hard. And they just go with easy solutions like creative that's static, or go with, less strenuous solutions such as Criteo or AdRoll. Another one is the Fred Hollows Foundation. Similar situation. They wanted to increase their ROI. They wanted to, be able to do these things in-house and not have to always go to designers to build out different variations. And they wanted to personalize the message more. So how do I personalize the message when I know perhaps that you've already donated before, or you haven't donated, or that you've been a big donor? So, knowing what they know about their donor base or people who potentially have been their website, we tailor that message rather than hitting everyone with your stock standard, give us $25. If someone has historically donated you tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, don't be hitting them with a $25 restore site campaign. But you know what? If they haven't donated before and it's their first donation, $25 to help restore someone's site's very, very compelling. So tailoring the message to who you're talking to, we saw a massive improvement in terms of performance. So in this case, the CTR increased by 133%. There was a 379% increase in donations. Mate, you can nail that one alone just by getting the big cash cow, not hitting with the $25. And but it's basic stuff that people don't do it. By getting the big cash cow with a more tailored message for them to do the big donation. A lot of not-for-profits don't make their money off the masses. They make their money off the big, big donors. So it's about how you tailor to them. And then thirdly, success of the campaign, that the cost per donation decreased by 78%. So, just putting some money into the creative up front, they've saved some substantial amount on the back end. Creative variations. Now, these ones are a bit more complicated because it does involve building more creatives at scale. And this example is HBO. If any of you have Netflix at home, you have also seen this at scale. So if you think about HBO or Netflix and you think about their back catalog, we're talking, tens of thousands of different pieces of media or pieces of content that they've got. Now, how you show that to get people to either, like in Netflix, get you to watch more, or alternatively get you to sign up, is very much creative led. Now, you can take the old school dumb approach of, hey, Jumanji or Bohemian Rhapsody is ranking really well, let's push that out because it's a big thing and that's how we're going to sign people up. Or if you're smart, you can tailor it based upon hitting specific audiences with specific messages, i.e. sports enthusiasts, you send them sports messages, musics, as many data profiles as you know. If I know that you watch documentaries, serve them documentaries. So what we did was build in templates to basically take all of their catalog and then tailor that and then scale it, on a massive scale in tens of thousands of creative assets with the ultimate goal of driving subscription. So that's something where if you're going to go with audience led and then you've got a big backbone, you need a really robust product feed in order to do that. But the uplifts, speak for themselves. Further examples is localization. So once again, this one you don't typically see in the Australian market because it's very, English based. We don't have that many large customer bases in comparison, say, the US or Europe, where you got to tailor to multiple languages. A campaign that we did for Google was across, which led to, over 60,000 different creative variations, where we had to do localizations for 22 markets in 7 languages. And we did that across EMEA, the US and Latin America, where we were pushing a product that was, tailored to small business SMB groups. So that's, once again, it's helping them scale, helping them tailor the message by language, by location, by product, and then building out on scale, building out these audience segments across global regions. The technology allows you to do that, but if you had to build out 60,000 manually, it just doesn't work. Location targeting. This is an example that we've done for bonds. Once again, this is quite basic, but you don't see it that much in the Australian market. So Google has if any of you work in search will know this, but Google basically has the coordinates for anyone, for anything, for anything that's sort of retail outlet they've got. So we know the GPS coordinates of that, and Google knows exactly down to 95% accuracy, down to 5 meters exactly where you are. So, but yet no one tailors those messages, or very rarely do you see them tailor the message to that consumer based upon their location. So for example, if you're a customer that only shops with bonds and you only buy baby gear, but the closest store to you doesn't stock it, don't serve them the ad. Or vice versa, if you do buy baby gear, change the ad based upon baby gear. So what we did was build audience profiles based around what we know about the bonds customer. We then load up the bonds store footprint. And then when you hit a certain proximity, we tailor that message, 1, based around the store, 2, based around what we know about you. Are you dormant? Have you shopped with us before? Do you only shop when you're on sale? And then we tailor that message within that bond branded template based around what we know about you. So we show, in this example, it's someone who's obviously, not looking after baby products. We offer them, they're sale led. So we've driven them with an offer, and then we show them their closest store in Chadstone. In this basic, once again, execution, we saw a 58% decrease in acquisition costs. Conversions increased by 65%, and then we saw a 68% increase in ROAS. Now, historically, what we would have done, we would have done maybe local campaigns, or we would have done the 40% off everything and then just smashed as many people as we can without any profiling. Product remarketing. Now, most people in the Australian market are probably the most familiar with dynamic, and that's what they see dynamic as, and the APAC region as well. Most people see dynamic as product remarketing. That's all they really know about product remarketing, because we're used to it. You go on to a travel site, you go onto an e-commerce site, and then you get chased by that pair of shoes or that apartment in Noosa until you book it. And sometimes you get chased for a month after you've actually purchased the product, which is always a fantastic experience. That's what we know, but obviously dynamic's much more than that. And it can be, much more advanced. So a campaign that we did for Google on Google Shopping to actually drive people to use Google Shopping more was we built out various product or, themes around specific products. So for example, if we know that you're a gamer, i.e. Google knows exactly what you are, so they've got the strong data behind this, we would then do a gaming ad served at you that would enable you to search for the actual ad. And then in this example, search for a gamepad, and then we would show the results. So it's linked directly to Google Shopping. If, for example, we knew that you're a surfer and you met the surfer profile, we would then obviously, you could do surfing related searches. So we build these various ads and then tailor that ad to that individual, which obviously is much, much, much more powerful than just serving standard Google Shopping static ads. You have to be careful with this stuff that you don't get too creepy, because if you get too detailed, people freak out. So you sort of, some of the product focusing stuff, bar dynamic remarketing, because everyone sort of accepts that now, but with other kind of profiling, you want to make sure that you don't go sometimes too pointed, because it can freak people out. But in this case, they just know that it's based on their search behavior. Finally, this is what product remarketing could and should look like, not some gnarly fluoro yellow ad that's, 16 different variations on a page. So some of the work we've done for Nike is dynamic remarketing, but it's I suppose it's more beautiful in that, in this case, if you've looked at LeBron's, that's a dynamic campaign, but it's more brand / dynamic. Another ad unit, which is sort of more an expandable unit, is, we pull in products that allow specific products, allow the consumer to click on those products and engage with them. But what we show you versus someone else will be based upon an audience profile. So we build different variations of that rather than just one stock standard ad unit. So it's taking something that performs, but adding a brand element into it and making it much more graphical than just purely bottom of the funnel, gnarly, chase me around the internet for 30 days post-purchase. Finally, advanced. Now, this is really, really kind of on the cutting edge and show you how far you can take this with advanced clients. So some work we did with Target in the US to drive store traffic. We integrated with Google Earth and with Street View. And basically it's a store traffic campaign, a bit of a spin on it, right? So you click on the store, you want to find the directions, and then we pull in, the old Street View campaign that shows you how it's going to look for you to get to that closest Target store. All possible, all done by APIs, but obviously it's quite technical. Our next one is for banks. And then what we do to make it real time is we tap into the API of the rates, the interest rates that can change multiple times daily. So you've got to be careful that you don't state the wrong rate. So what we do in this instance is we will take into an API to the banks, tap into their actual rates, and then these rates will dynamically always change based upon the current rate in market at that point in time. And then finally, an example for Eurorail is, once again, price driven. We tap into someone's recommendation engine and then dynamically change those ticket prices depending upon what we know about the customer. So you sometimes can pick this up in Aussie, the clients or the e-commerce website savvy. They actually will dynamically change the price based around what they know about you or what you've interacted with. But you can do that on a website level, but you can also do that on an ad level. So you can serve different prices to different people based around what you know about them or based upon the recommendation engine, rather than having a static price that might not be relevant based upon movements in ticket volumes, whether it's an airline, whether it's a train. We can dynamically change the price based upon an API feed. So that was probably a lot to take in. Hopefully we kept most of you, and there was some interesting stuff there. So if you've got any questions, we'd love to help those. And obviously we'd love for you guys to use this and, share it with your clients and you sort of do some of this work, because it is in the early stages of Australia. It's just a lack of people having the courage to try it with their agencies, but it is all technically possible. And we're hopefully should see this stuff rolled out in the Australian market in the next 12 to 18 months by more and more clients. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. That was super interesting. I mean, from my perspective, I am, my background is direct marketing. So I started at a direct marketing agency back in 2004. I know that's a very long time ago. And we were doing kind kind of large scale data driven campaigns, mostly through direct mail and email and a bit of direct response. This stuff would have been like dream, like to get this amount of combinations going. So really, really, really cool stuff. I've got a few questions while we wait for others. So as Sam mentioned, if you have got a question, thank you all for hanging around. Put your questions in the chat box, and I'll we'll get around to answering them. So my first question, Sam, is that obviously the minute you start talking about the volume of variations that you're talking about, I think you mentioned 60,000 dynamic creatives for the Google campaign. It sounds eye-wateringly expensive. I'm really intrigued at kind of what the minimum stakes are for this, how much data you need, kind of what size of the campaigns, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah. Okay. So a good way to talk to clients in the early days, they're sort of doing a version of this, but it's sort of like a batch together version. So this is smart shopping. So Google is taking your Google product feed from Google Market, and they're going after that market by just spraying that everywhere on sort of remnant inventory. But effectively, clients are doing this now through smart shopping, but just not in a nice brand-led way. So they've got the feed, and you're already doing this based upon how many products you potentially might have as a retailer. The difference being is we're taking that feed and putting it into a more of a templated model. So when they want to look at it from a product marketing viewpoint, that's that one. That's quite basic. Then the most advanced is, yes, it's APIs, it's tapping into pricing engines. That stuff is pretty advanced. But then the basic example, such as a koala, it's pretty easy. You just pick the elements you want to test. You want to test the tagline. It's like everyone knows how to test an email header. Everyone knows they're already applying the same logic to other mediums, but they just haven't thought to apply that, or know it's technically possible to apply that approach to creative. So once the work is done in building the elements, you know, it's not a big project for those more basic versions. But yes, if you want to get really, really advanced, which is possible, and it's nirvana for some advanced marketers, it can get very, very technical. But at the same time, the entry level stuff, like some of the stuff we've done for Koala, or just pulling in the location of a store, it's all very basic stuff, but the uplift is quite impressive.
Awesome, thank you. Ben, do you have any questions?
There is a question from Chin in the chat.
Okay. I mean, I'll ask that. So it says, Sam, so when you do these ads, the merchant ad platform, there's the identity of the person targeted?
Good question. So, okay. So you will never know it down to an individual level. Yeah. But I can tell you right now, Google knows exactly where you are. Google knows exactly what you're logged into. Facebook is listening to your phone call and our discussion right now, even if you're not logged in. So it's all technically possible, right? The person will not know that you've targeted them. You can't target to an individual level. But it's like if you go you go try to book a holiday to Bali, and then you get served Bali ads, you know that you're being targeted. So when you get really, really detailed and it's specific around something the individual's done, they'll know that it's been based upon a behavior. Mm-hmm. When you're going after an audience target with a message that's more tailored to them, i.e. the Fred Hollows example, if we're selling you a message that has a bigger donation amount of, say, $100 versus someone else at $25, you'd have no idea. It's like the way Qantas talks to you through emails. You don't know, but I'm telling you right now, Qantas doesn't talk to everyone, whether you're a premium customer versus bronze versus silver versus gold. Those messages are definitely tailored to where you are and how they tailor you to get you to do specific things. So they only know when you get really, 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 really detailed. But if I show you a price of a flight for $50 to Bali and show someone else 75, you've got no idea. You just assume everyone's seen the same thing.
Excellent, thanks. Well done for asking that question, Chin. I was sticking away from it because I thought it would open up a can of worms. But good response also. So I think that is all of the questions that we have. So unless there's any luck, we've still got a few people on this call. We've still got 20 people here. So feel free to get your last question in. Otherwise, we will wrap up. Here we go, Liz. Hi, Liz, and thanks for the question. So thanks for the interesting presentation. For startups interested in entry-level implementations in Koala, are you able to give an indication of roughly how long a project like that takes to deliver?
Yeah, Will can normally turn one around in a weekend. No, look, so how long's a piece of string? So there's a few factors. So firstly is how engaged is the client? How much buy-in do they have within their organization? Are we going to get resistance from, sometimes we get internal creative teams that get a bit funny and feel that we're trying to, tread on toes and so forth, when they don't realize we're actually trying to build something for them to then enable them to do it. So we build this stuff and then we step away and then you guys are running it, not us. Like, this is how it evolves. So that's when you also have to look at the capability of the team. So how much training is involved. So yeah, there's multiple elements. At its quickest, Will could be a month, 3 weeks.
Yeah, for instance, we did one for Fantastic Furniture in about 2 weeks, but it was a fairly simple build. But by the looks of the question, in terms of something that Koala did, if you're talking from like a product remarketing perspective, the thing that would take maybe the longest on a build like that would actually just be setting up the floodlights, namely that you have to set it up and give it at least 30 days to start collecting data. If you wanted to go with like a one-to-one product remarketing, so that if a user click anywhere on your site based off what they've clicked on, now you can automate an ad that is specific to that page or that item that they've clicked on. So really it's the data collection and implementation stuff up front, less than everything else surrounding the dynamic design and the build.
And to that point, like if it's going to be a basic one, like getting a template, testing backgrounds, testing taglines, testing optimal pictures, it then comes down to, well, how many audiences are we doing that? How many permutations? So, in the Koala example, we weren't testing tens of different elements. So that's another factor. If it's just quite basic and you're not selling truckloads of products versus you're selling beds, it simplifies the project as well. So a lot of it comes down to how many elements are you scaling. So if you look like an airline or you look at hotels, look at all the different permutations of locations and prices. That's why they become much, much bigger projects.
Awesome, thanks, Sam. We've got one more question from Bilal. So he'd like to know how much you charge for your projects. Is it based on the number of templates that you'll create? And is it accessible to small businesses?
So yes, it's definitely accessible to small businesses. It will pay itself off typically. So if you look at the uplifts from some of those case studies, the uplift then outweighs sort of the costs. So then it comes down to, well, what are you investing in the media? What are you currently investing in paying your current creative agency? Because you could actually look at it as a cost saving. But then if you're doing minimal media, well, do you invest this up in costs? So look, are we charging Amazon and Google? No, they're in the hundreds of thousands. But the smaller Australian clients, it's got to be cheaper, and then we scope it out. But it's not. It'll come down to how much you're spending, whether it's profitable or not, and we always will scope it out. And then it comes down to how much feeds involved, how many permutations, how many creative elements. But to your point, if you only want one template versus someone who needs tens of templates, that's what sort of determines the cost. So something like Koala was relatively cheap.
So just, I guess to frame that for the people on the call, are there other small brands in Australia? Because Koala is a relatively big brand now. But so are there other smallish brands or startups that are using this kind of technology?
Well, I would say Zip's small, but they're obviously not. So the creative clients that we work with in the Australian market, I mean, most of them, yeah, they're not startup-ish. So, but then again, a lot of these furniture guys, a lot of these fashion guys have no money whatsoever. They're a well-known brand, but they've got no cash. But you know, most of them are more established businesses. They generally are advanced, but they're not happy with the current solution. So for example, they're not happy with how Criteo looks. They're not happy with the fact they don't get transparency, and they're not happy with the current solution. So they've already bought into the idea, they've got the budget, and then that's why they look for alternates. It's very hard to take someone who's under-investing in SEM, under-investing in social, to then get them to then invest in dynamic, because they're not even investing in the basics of SEM and social. So typically they're more progressive, and typically they're already doing those channels is typically the clients that pick it up. So they're historically more established. But examples are Zip, Koala, Bonds, Fred Hollow's Foundation, and there's a few other clients we work with in the fashion space, like Champion, Flora and Fauna. But yeah, typically they're not early stages.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. So no particular, no hard questions there from the community. So I think we're going to start wrapping things up now. So first of all, I'd like to thank Sam and Will for taking the time out to join us this evening. Appreciate this is after work hours, so thank you so much for kind of educating us all on your product. There is a few questions coming through around publicly sharing the video and the slides, of course. So expect an email from us in the next. It's going to take us probably about a week or two to get this one out, just because the team is very busy right now. And they will arrive email, and we'll also post them to the meetup community. But if you do have any questions, we'll share Sam's details. He can field any questions that you have. So I think without any more delays, we'll wrap things up. But thank you so much, Sam, and thank you everyone for taking the time out to join us this evening.
All right, thanks guys.
Bye everyone.
See ya.
Bye.